begin with. And this works. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Now we're going too far. Okay. So, short story about why I'm here at CCC is, well, as for the title, I've been working in writing centers for 5 years now, both the undergraduate and graduate levels. The idea for this project came about when I was challenged by my New Mexico State University professor, Dr. Jan Almgeld, and my job was to critique and analyze a study involving my area of focus, which is writing centers, and combine that with computer-mediated composition. And so while I was researching, I came across this article, which is The Invisible Interface, Microsoft Word in the Writing Center by Amber Buck. And this Buck discusses the complexities of working with writers on computer devices, particularly how MS Word functions and features influence one's composition habits and patterns. A major example would be how it draws users' eyes to grammatical and spelling matters with, you know, the whole green squiggly line, all of that. So that got me thinking about what technologies I encounter when I'm working in writing centers. And these are all things that I've just come across at some point or another working with them. I've worked with people with pen and pencil and paper, of course, desktop computer, laptop computer, a tablet. I've even worked with a couple people on a smartphone where I think they came in there just to get the signature to say they came in, but, you know, here, look at my friend's paper on a screen, you know, this big. Next. Great. And so that also got me then thinking about what are the contemporary views and scholarship on the direction of writing centers and technology. So it gave me to words like Stuart Blythe, who is saying that while writing centers have been rushing to add network computer technologies to their services, but logistical questions have dominated. How can this be done rather than theoretical questions? So this got me thinking, has this swayed too far to the other side? Have we examined logistical ramifications enough? Have we established a common ground between theory and practice? So, you know, while we have a lot of theory about, you know, this is where composition is going, it's going more multimodal, it's going to these ideas, you know, we're going to multimedia centers. Well, how are we going to implement these? What things are going to happen? David Sheridan says, humans are intensely multimodal. Our culture in an electronic age is intensely multimodal. And if students are going to fully participate in this culture, then they need to have sophisticated understanding of multimodal composition. They need multiple literacies. Jackie Gretsch McKinney, we have witnessed a fundamental change in the textual climate. Before, putting a text on paper and writing for that linear left to right, top to bottom, page to page form was the way to write. That has changed. Now there are many ways to communicate through writing, and consequently putting a text to paper is now a rhetorical choice that one should not make hastily. We ought to really think through whether a paper essay, say, is the best way to reach our audience or purpose. Concern I have with that, though, is what is any of this based on, and how can it be effectively and realistically applied and practiced? So do we have quantitative research that has been done on this matter? What definitive data exists on composition devices and technologies that we can hang our hat on? And then lastly, how do we go about collecting such information? So these are all things I was seeking to explore at MSU's Writing Center. And so as an example I did for my quantitative research class, I came across something like this, and hopefully you can anyone see that? It's a little bit too small. So, sorry, but some of the questions here on the left corner here is, which tools do you plan on working on your document with? Check all that apply. What devices did you use to compose your document? And we have, you know, types of laptops, tablets, smartphones, etc., pen, pencil, paper. And then inspired largely also by Buck's article, I determined it was important to also ask, you know, what word processing program did they use while composing their work? And if it is a multimodal or multimedia document, then, you know, what type of program did they use? Was it PowerPoint, Prezi, Photoshop? You could add more. The idea of this is that I'm sure most of you, if you've worked in writing centers, you have a form you hand out to the person when they come in, just for your records. I would hand this out to them as well. Doesn't take very long, it just takes barely a moment of their time. Then, through this, the forms would be collected and tabulated much like other report forms throughout the semester, and you could graph the information as follows. So right here you see, more than likely the majority of our submissions are going to be with pen, pencil, and paper. Probably some on desktop, PC desktop, which is the one that we primarily have in the Writing Center at NMSU. Mac laptop, PC laptop. Again, things like this that just give us more of a definitive quantitative understanding of what devices people are using when they compose, or what they would like to possibly use when they're working with us in the Writing Centers. So here too, looking at what's the difference between what they'd like to work with in the Writing Center versus what they use to work on the document itself. Types of word processing programs, things like that. Implications and ramifications I'm concerned with is what kind of resources are available to students in the Writing Center. And so maybe could this information be used to warrant and justify the spending on technology devices? This became very critical to our Writing Center at NMSU because on our form it always says, any suggestions for the Writing Center, I'd say about 95% of those from last year said get newer computers. So it would have been helpful maybe to have something that says, for the administration people to say, hey, these are things that people would like to work on. I believe our computers had Windows 2001 on it, so a little bit behind the times. That said, other implications and ramifications potentially of the Writing Centers are whether that can affect the identity of the Writing Center. Does that affect how we hire and train, our hiring and training practices? What about our training pedagogy? What are we going to, if we are going to emphasize more and more on multimodal and new media type work, how is that going to, what is that going to do for our training practices, what we look for as effective tutoring or consulting. Speaking of that, it's critical that we address the consultant's own comfort and proficiency with technologies in order to see if there exists a gap between the composition modes students perform and the kind consultants can help with. So thus, it's critical we examine tutors' familiarity and comfort with computer-mediated programs and devices. And I think this is most important, or very important, reading on screens. So we can all agree reading something on a screen versus on print is vastly different, huge change of perspective. So I thought something that would be helpful when you're either thinking of hiring a consultant or maybe when you're trying to engage new training, would be to hand this out. Hopefully people can read it. But top of here just asks, how familiar are you with image editing programs such as Photoshop? But not familiar, never used, somewhat familiar, very familiar. Then I think also, how comfortable though would you be tutoring a student using said program? So for example, I've used Photoshop quite a bit, but maybe if you said, oh, would you feel comfortable tutoring a student who was using the program, I might not feel quite as comfortable on it. How familiar are you with multimedia programs such as PowerPoint and Prezi? Same thing here. How comfortable would you be tutoring them there? And then once again here, how comfortable are you with text and documents on screen? This is why I think questions about screens are critical. These look a lot larger on my on my computer. But you just see the types of, if you can see closely enough, how much text or information is available on a screen depending on what the device is. Desktop screen, obviously right here, you can pretty much see an entire paper. It's kind of tablet, remember, when that's being shrunk down, how much more you have to squeeze in. And all the way to a smartphone. how you'd have to read it and glance through it. More problematics. So these are just questions I think we should be asking when we're gathering such information is, should tutors' jobs even require they be proficient using such devices? I say this because, I would think in our writing center at least, we don't say, well, my background's not in biology. We don't say, well, I can't help you with your biology paper, right? No, we say, we are skills we all learn, that we all are capable of, that can help you with this. But that's still a question to raise. Similarly, is this similar to requiring a tutor to be an expert in grammar and spelling or citations? I know I would say probably speak for 99% of my coworkers in the NMSU Writing Center, which, while I think we're knowledgeable on grammar, I wouldn't say we are experts necessarily, or that we can get every single grammatical detail correct. What does this say about the goal of the center and the role of the tutor and student? And lastly, if we devote more time to addressing writers and tutors to technology-mediated pedagogy, will that come at the expense of other critical writing center pedagogical elements? If so, is it worth it, and why? So you might want to think about those of you who have undergone writing center pedagogy training, something like that, or training for a course to work at the writing center. Think about maybe what are the types of things that were covered that you felt were really critical, and maybe would that have to be taken out, or how would that have to be revised, maybe even compromised for us to look at? Digital